بسم الله والحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, I know that there's a lot going on in the world around us today. We have a number of pressing issues on our minds, but as we get closer to the month of Dhul Hijjah and the days of Hajj, I would like to direct our attention to the Prophet and Messenger Ibrahim alayhi salam. As many of you know, his story was or has everything to do with Hajj. And beyond that, beyond all of the symbolism that we find in his life that resonates today in our pilgrimage, there are numerous lessons that we can learn from these historic accounts in the Quran, and those lessons can be applied in our lives today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. In their stories, there's truly a lesson for people of reason. In fact, I believe that every time you review the stories of the Quran, you will find that they resonate with you in a different way. Every time you read a story, it will resonate with you differently. At least that's been my experience over the years. And often when we read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the lessons that we access in that reading are those that are often most relevant to our current situation and easily understood. And as we grow in knowledge and experience, it's as if Allah's words present different lessons based on our current need. It's as if Allah's words continue to deliver the lessons the more that we read them. And so, repeated readings and recitations, it's not only something that is encouraged, but it's something that is essential. It's needed and necessary in order that we can uncover the divine instructions that we require to successfully navigate through this world. And the story of Ibrahim is very profound. Ibrahim alayhi salam, his story is one of only a few stories in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses aspects of his messenger's entire life cycle from birth to old age. There are only a few that have been addressed in such historic accounts in the Quran, talking about their childhood, when they grew up to be young men, later on as prophets and messengers into their old age. If you think about it for a moment, you may be able to identify a handful. And because of such coverage, you should understand that the role of that prophet and messenger was and still is quite profound. And so today I want to talk to you about really one or 2 points from that story. And inshallah, in the weeks to come, we'll talk about some other points from this amazing story. And the first of those occurred when he was a young man. Ibrahim alayhi salam was raised in a society of pagans, as many of you know. And because his father was the idol maker of his community, and his father was such a person that not only made idols, but he rejected Allah completely. We understand that the nature of the Quraysh, a lot of their idolatry did not reject Allah. They believed, but still they worshipped idols and dedicated themselves to those deities. Ibrahim's father, however, it was said that he completely rejected Allah. And so we could say that Ibrahim, he grew up within the epicenter of idolatry, if you will. His people worshipped a variety of creatures. They worshipped not only the stone and wooden idols that his father and those that came before him carved with their own hands, but they also worshiped the stars and the planets, the celestial bodies, and some of them worshipped their kings, and their rulers. And for some reason, even as a young boy, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he just did not take to such idolatry. He couldn't understand how people would worship the objects that they fashioned, that had no power or might in themselves. And instead of following the crowd, his community, this is very, very powerful, even as a young boy, instead of following along, following the crowd and accepting the status quo, he was blessed with sound judgment at a very young age. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that indeed we had granted Ibrahim sound judgment early on, for we knew him very well. Surah Al-Anbiya. Ibrahim challenged his father and his people on their idolatry before the age of 10. Imagine that. This was all before the age of 10. He was thinking about these things and challenging and questioning the practices of not only his own father, but his entire community. And as he grew, he continued to question things and search for answers. One night, he left his house to seek solace on a mountaintop, much like our prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. And as he got onto the mountaintop, he rested his back against the mountain wall. He gazed off into the night sky, thinking about all the celestial bodies that were worshipped by some of his people. And his heart was disturbed by that. But he spent those moments in reflection. And this is where he found Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jal, he recounts these moments in great detail. And I'll read some of the translation of these verses. Surah Al-An'am, if you look there today, from verses 75, and you read to 79, you can go further into that, into the early 80s. But it starts at 75 when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what means, and thus did we show Ibrahim the realm of the heavens and the earth, that he would be among the certain in faith. When the night grew dark upon him, he saw a star and said, "This is my Lord." But when it set, he said, "I do not love things that set." Then when he saw the moon rising, he said, "This is my Lord." But when it disappeared, he said, "If my Lord does not guide me, I will certainly be one of the misguided people." And then he saw the sun shining, and he said, "This must be my Lord, it is the greatest." But again, when it set, he declared, "O my people, I totally reject whatever you associate with Allah in worship. I have turned my face towards the one who has originated the heavens and the earth, being upright, and I am not one of the polytheists." أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى ونصلي ونسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Brothers and sisters, today, as I look, and probably just as much as you're looking at the world around you, and all of its challenges and all of its conflicts, one of the most concerning and relevant aspects is the control of narratives. The control of how stories are told. In the digital age, our time, our era, the digital age, we have unbridled access to content and information like never before. The struggle, however, is who's presenting the information and how. According to an article published in Business Insider, it says in 1983, 90% of U.S. media was controlled by 50 companies. In 1983. 50 companies controlled 90% of the media. as of 2011, 90% was controlled by just 6 companies. And in 2017, that number was reduced to 5. 90% of the media companies in the United States are controlled by 5 companies. AT&T, Comcast, Disney, Viacom, CBS, and Fox Corporation. Meaning the information and the content and the media are controlled by these 5 companies. And according to some, media integrity is at risk when a small number of companies and individuals control the media market. And media integrity, of course, refers to the ability of a media outlet to serve the public interest and democratic process, making it resilient to institutional corruption within the media system, economy of influence, conflicting dependence, and political clientelism. Such a concentration of control often results in media bias. This concentration of control of the media down to 5 companies often, or could possibly, and we can see it today, results in media bias. Basically, the information that we receive is presented through a framework of sorts. And the goal is to shape your thoughts and my thoughts and our feelings to achieve the desired outcomes of those presenting the content. Not only are we subject to bias in the media reflected in which stories are selected, what makes the news, what stories actually make the news, but how much coverage they get, and then how the story is actually told. And we also have to contend with sensationalism, making things seem other than they actually are. It's a very tricky situation, and this requires today's content consumer to be savvier than ever. We as people cannot afford to be passive consumers, just letting the media wash over us. But we have to be very actively engaged and poised to employ critical thinking and analytical reasoning. And that's exactly what I think about after rereading the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Even as a young boy, gifted with sound judgment, here he is standing up to the narrative of the day by exercising his ability to think critically and rationally analyze the information he's given in a sincere pursuit for the truth. That's what's required to achieve such an outcome. We have to be willing to critically think about the information when it's presented to us and use our rationale and logic to reason to come to truthful conclusions, as did Ibrahim alayhi salam. And what was the result? After wading through a sea of falsehood, deviation, and extremism, he found what he was looking for. He found Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he found true faith, and then he went on to be the father of the prophets. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to guide us to that which he loves and is pleased with, to keep us safe, to keep us secure, to keep us healthy. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant health to those of us that are ill and strength to the weak. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieve those who are oppressed, to answer their supplications, for indeed he is capable of all things. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.